The protocol worked perfectly. That was the problem. I stood behind the glass with my hands clasped behind my back, posture straight, expression neutral. An image carefully cultivated over years of labs, committees, and controlled failures. On the other side of the transparent barrier, 12 werewolves waited on the marked floor of the training hall, bare feet aligned with white lines that glowed faintly under sterile light. The room smelled like disinfectant and ozone. Clean. Predictable. Protocol Alpha 7 engaged, a calm synthetic voice announced overhead. Data bloomed across my tablet. Neural dampening curves stabilizing, cortisol dropping, aggression indexes falling exactly where the model predicted. Perfect slopes. Perfect compliance. A success. The wolves felt it before they showed it. Shoulders relaxed. Jaws unclenched. Spines eased as if a collective breath had been released. This was the point. This was always the selling point. Calm without chains. Safety without cages. Except safety wasn't supposed to look like this. One of them, Unit 8, male, mid-30s, brown hair clipped too short, swayed. His eyes unfocused, pupils dilating not with rage but with absence. He lifted his hands slowly, as if surprised to find them attached to his body. "Hey," he murmured, voice flat. I can't." He stopped mid-sentence. Not frozen. Not aggressive. Lost. The numbers didn't change. The graphs stayed beautiful. I frowned, despite myself. "Increase sensory feedback by 5%, I said into my mic. "He's dissociating." The system complied instantly. Unit 8 staggered. His knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Not thrashing. Not roaring. Just empty. A ripple went through the line of wolves. Unease, not anger. Confusion. One of them reached out, fingers twitching, then pulled back as if unsure whether touching was allowed. "Hold position," I ordered automatically. Inside my chest, something tightened. "That's not control." The voice cut through the room like a thrown object. I turned. He hadn't come through the door. He never did. Marcus Hale was already inside the hall, boots loud against the polished floor, jacket half-zipped, sleeves rolled up like he'd lost patience with fabric as a concept. He moved fast, all weight and intent, ignoring the lines, the sensors, the rules. "Protocol is still active," I snapped. "You're not authorized." Marcus was already kneeling beside Unit 8. He placed both hands on the man's shoulders, bare, grounded, unapologetically physical. No gloves, no interface, just skin and pressure. "Breathe," Marcus said, voice low but carrying. "Stay here. Stay in your body." He leaned close, forehead almost touching the other man's. "You hear me? You're not gone." Unit 8 shuddered. A breath tore out of him, ragged, ugly, real. His fingers curled into the concrete. The monitors spiked. "Deactivate the protocol," Marcus said, not looking at me. "No," I said. "You're interfering with a live test." He finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, green gold, burning with something that wasn't rage but came close enough to make my skin itch. "You're not testing a system," he said. "You're erasing him." "That's an exaggeration." "Is it?" He gestured at the man under his hands. "He didn't lose aggression. He lost orientation. You didn't calm the wolf, you muted the person." The room felt colder. Or maybe that was just under my skin. "Protocol Alpha 7 is designed to suppress involuntary aggressive responses," I said evenly. "Nothing more." Marcus snorted. Funny how suppression always goes further than intended. He reached out and slapped the manual override on the wall. Hard. The lights flickered. The hum under the floor cut out. Unit 8 gasped like he'd surfaced from deep water, eyes snapping into focus, fear crashing in a second later. I'm back," he said hoarsely. "I'm back." Relief rippled through the wolves. Real this time. Messy. Alive. My tablet screamed alerts. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. Stepping through the glass partition at last. Marcus stood slowly, rolling his shoulders like he was preparing for impact. "Stopping you from calling that treatment. This protocol reduces violent incidents by 43%, I shot back. Citywide. You know what that means? It means they're quieter, he said. Not safer. That's not how data works. He took a step closer. Too close. I could feel heat coming off him. The scent of sweat and iron and something feral my mind refused to categorize. You can't chart instinct, Marcus said. And you definitely can't amputate it and expect the rest to function. I felt it then. The irritation giving way to something stranger. A cold thread slipping under my skin, winding tight. Your methods are archaic, I said. Pain-based conditioning, guesswork. And yours are clean, he shot back. That's the problem. Around us the wolves watched. Silent. Waiting. I looked at Unit 8 again. At the way his hands trembled as Marcus stepped away. At the way he stayed sitting on the floor. Like standing too fast might send him back into that hollow place. The numbers on my screen still insisted everything was fine. For the first time since I'd written the first line of code, I wasn't sure I believed them. This isn't over, I said. Marcus's mouth curved. Not a smile. Something sharper. No, he agreed. It's just starting. By every measurable standard, the protocol was flawless. I sat alone in my office long after the training base had gone quiet, the city outside reduced to a grid of distant lights and muted motion. Floor-to-ceiling screens surrounded my desk, each one alive with data, neural activity maps, hormonal response curves, aggression suppression indexes scrolling in calm orderly lines. No spikes, no anomalies, no errors. I replayed the session frame by frame, overlaying biometric readouts with behavioral markers. Unit 8's vitals normalized within seconds of activation. Cortisol dropped. Adrenal response dampened exactly as designed. Perfect. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly, forcing my shoulders to relax. Marcus Hale had overreacted. That was the rational conclusion. His methods were physical, subjective, dependent on instinct and improvisation. Of course he distrusted a system that didn't require his hands or his presence. Of course he'd dramatized a temporary dissociative response. A known side effect. Rare. Correctable. I tagged the incident for minor adjustment and closed the report. The screen went dark. And immediately, unhelpfully, I saw the wolf's eyes again. Not wild, not violent, empty. My jaw tightened before I noticed it happening. I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth, a grounding trick I'd taught myself years ago, and stared at the reflection of my own face in the black glass. You're projecting, I said aloud to the empty room. That's all. The words sounded reasonable. Thin, but reasonable. Sleep did not agree. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint hum of the city bleeding through the walls. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the moment Unit 8's knees had buckled, the way his body had simply disconnected. Not pain, not fear, absence. I rolled onto my side, then my back. My chest felt heavy, like something was sitting just behind my sternum, pressing inward. I checked the time for the fourth time in 10 minutes and clenched my teeth when I realized my jaw ached. Ridiculous. At 6:12, my comm buzzed. I answered without checking the ID. This had better be important. You always sound like that, Marcus said. But yes, it is. I closed my eyes. Of course it was him. I filed my report, I said. Your interference has been noted. Great, he replied. I'll frame it. I'm serious. So am I. A pause. You didn't sleep. That made my eyes snap open. That's none of your business. He hummed thoughtfully. You look like someone who trusted his own graphs too much. I don't trust them, I said. They're accurate. I saw your data wall. I frowned. You were not authorized in my office. Glass walls, Evan. He said lightly. Very transparent. Very aesthetic. I don't care about aesthetics. Shame. The graphs are beautiful. There it was. That edge of amusement that scraped against my nerves. If you have a point, make it. I do. His tone shifted, losing its humor without gaining anger. Your numbers don't show what happens after, when the protocol ends. When they're alone. They're stable, I said automatically. Stable isn't the same as whole. Silence stretched between us. I felt the weight in my chest again, heavier now that he'd named it. You crossed a line yesterday, I said finally. Marcus didn't argue. And you built one. The comm went dead. I stared at the dark screen, my reflection staring back, calm, controlled, immaculate. My jaw tightened again. The numbers were still clean. The feeling was not. The training hall Marcus used wasn't listed in the official facility schematics. No glass. No sensors. No calming lights embedded in the walls. Just a wide concrete space that smelled like metal, sweat, and something older. Ozone maybe? Or adrenaline soaked into the floor over years of use. I stood near the entrance with my arms crossed, very aware of how out of place I looked in a pressed shirt and clean shoes. The wolves were already there, 6 of them this time, stretching, pacing, rolling their shoulders like athletes preparing for impact. They looked at me. Not with fear. With curiosity. Eyes forward, Marcus barked. They snapped to attention instantly. He moved through them like a force of nature, correcting posture with a shove here, a sharp tug there. His voice cut through the space, clear, uncompromising. You don't fight the shift, he said. You ride it. You breathe through it. Again. One of the wolves, a woman with dark braids and a scar running down her cheek, gritted her teeth as her shoulders twitched, bones threatening to realign. She let out a low sound, half growl, half gasp. Breathe, Marcus said, stepping into her space. He placed 2 fingers just under her ribs. Here, not your chest. Don't rush it. She obeyed. The tremor passed. I frowned. You're inducing stress responses, I said. That's inefficient. Marcus didn't look at me. Stress is honest. The woman stumbled on the next cycle. Her knee hit the floor hard. I took a step forward before I could stop myself. You should pause. She's fine, Marcus said sharply. The woman waved him off, breathing hard but smiling despite the sweat pouring down her face. I'm fine, she echoed. Just misjudged. Marcus nodded once and moved on. I clenched my jaw. They continued. Shifts half-formed and restrained. Muscles strained. Breath hitched. Pain flashed across faces, but so did focus. Determination. Identity. They weren't empty. They were present. Again, Marcus said over and over, his patience thin but his attention razor sharp. He noticed everything, a tremor in a hand, a breath taken too shallow, a moment when fear threatened to tip into panic. He intervened only when it mattered. I hated how effective it was. My irritation curdled into something else as the session wore on. Envy, sharp and unwelcome. My methods produced compliance. His produced resilience. One of the wolves, young, barely past his first controlled shift, lost balance and slammed shoulder first into the wall. He cried out, more startled than hurt. I waited for Marcus to snap. Instead, he crouched beside him, lowering his voice. You felt it coming, didn't you? The kid nodded, swallowing hard. Next time, Marcus said, tapping his chest. You slow it here before it reaches your limbs. The boy nodded again and stood, eyes bright. Not afraid. Alive. My breathing had quickened without my permission. I became aware of it suddenly. The way my chest rose and fell too fast, the tension coiled between my shoulders. I forced myself to inhale slowly, analytically. This was primitive. Unsafe. Impossible to scale. And yet, you're staring, Marcus said. I stiffened. I'm evaluating. Sure you are. He wiped sweat from his brow with the hem of his shirt, exposing skin marked with old scars, training injuries, not trophies. You don't like it. I don't like the lack of safeguards. Your safeguards shut them down. That's an oversimplification. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell him. Salt, heat, iron. Is it? I opened my mouth to respond, and found nothing ready. Behind us the wolves laughed quietly among themselves, trading comments, sharing water, bruised and breathing and unmistakably whole. Something twisted in my chest, unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable. For the first time, I wondered what my protocols would make of me if they were turned inward. The alert hit at 9:17. I was halfway through a revision pass on Alpha 7's feedback loop when every screen in my office flared red at once. Not a warning. A failure. Protocol interruption detected, the system announced, far less calm than it pretended to be. Unauthorized override. Zone C. My stomach tightened. Zone C was not a training hall. It was an active city response unit. I was already moving when my comm chimed again, this time with a priority tag from operations. Get to the base. Now. The corridors buzzed with tension when I arrived. Technicians clustered around terminals, voices low and sharp. A pair of wolves sat on a bench near the wall, boots planted wide, hands clasped tight between their knees. Both looked shaken. Neither looked violent. That, somehow, made it worse. Status, I said, stepping into the control room. Protocol disengaged mid-cycle, a tech replied. Manual trigger. We didn't authorize it. I scanned the logs, fingers flying over the interface. The override signature was crude, physical, not code-based. A hard cutoff. Like ripping a plug out of a wall. I already knew what name would come up. Marcus Hale is on site, Operation said behind me. He was seen entering Zone C 15 minutes before the interruption. I exhaled slowly. Of course he was. They found him in the corridor outside the negotiation room, leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the world, arms crossed. Expression unimpressed. You want to explain yourself? I asked, stopping a few feet away. He glanced up. Morning to you too. You cut power to a live protocol. I stopped to collapse. That's not your call. Funny, he said. The wolves thought it was. I ignored the comment, and pulled the data up on my tablet, angling it so he could see. Your timing correlates perfectly with the interruption. That makes you the primary suspect in a sabotage investigation. He snorted. You people love that word. Because it applies. Sabotage implies intent to damage, Marcus said. I intended to keep them standing. That's not how systems work. No, he agreed. That's how bodies work. I clenched my jaw. You don't get to freelance inside a city unit. And you don't get to pretend your algorithm knows what it feels like when someone's spine locks up and their vision goes gray. We stared at each other, the air between us taut enough to hum. Operations cleared their throat. We're assigning joint oversight until we understand what happened. I turned sharply. Joint? You built the system, they continued. He understands the field response. You'll investigate together. Marcus's mouth curved. Not quite a smile. Lucky me. This is not a partnership, I said coldly. Relax, he replied. I don't do partners. Too much talking. Good. I shot back. Because I prefer data. Yeah, he said, pushing off the wall and stepping closer. I noticed. You hide behind it. I bristled. I don't hide behind anything. Sure, Marcus said lightly. You just trust graphs more than breathing. I opened my mouth with a cutting response ready, and stopped. He was too close again. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him through the air, the steady presence of a body that knew exactly where it was. My pulse jumped, traitorous and fast. I stepped back, annoyed at myself. We'll start with the logs, I said. And if I find you tampered with... You'll what? He interrupted. Write me up? For someone who hates protocols, I said. You spend a lot of time inside their buildings. Someone has to, he replied. To catch the mess when they fail. Our eyes locked. For a fraction of a second the argument shifted, no longer about systems or wolves, but about something unspoken and electric. Then a technician called my name, breaking the moment. I turned away, irritation flaring to cover whatever that had been. Come on, I said to Marcus. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. He fell into step beside me. Careful, Cole, he murmured. You might learn something that doesn't fit on a screen. I didn't answer. But my chest felt tight again, and this time, I couldn't pretend it was just stress. My apartment had always been my safest algorithm. Clean lines. Neutral colors. No excess, no clutter. Every surface had a purpose. Every object a place. Even the lights adjusted themselves gradually. Never startling, never demanding. Control. Embedded into architecture, I dropped my keys into the tray by the door and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the silence. It didn't press in the way the training halls did. It didn't breathe. It simply existed, obedient and still. I toed off my shoes and moved through the space on autopilot, loosening my collar, rolling my sleeves with precise symmetry. The mirror by the kitchen caught my reflection. Composed, contained, beta perfect. People assumed that meant harmless. They were wrong. I hadn't always been like this. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, letting my gaze drift to the faint scar on my forearm. Thin. Almost invisible now. Most people never noticed it. I did. It had come from a broken bottle and an uncontrolled shift. Someone else's. A wolf who hadn't meant to hurt anyone. A wolf who'd lost himself to instinct and panic and fear, and taken pieces of the room with him. I'd been 16. I remembered the sound more than the pain. Glass exploding. A snarl that didn't sound human. The way the room had tipped into chaos in seconds, like gravity itself had given up. No protocols. No safeguards. Just bodies and blood and screaming. The official reports called it an unfortunate incident. I called it a failure of preparation. I'd learned something that night. Aggression didn't announce itself. It arrived fast, messy, and irreversible. And apologies didn't knit nerves back together. Control, on the other hand, could be designed. I finished the water and set the glass down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the counter. My jaw tightened, the familiar ache settling in as it always did when I thought too long about the past. People like Marcus talked about trust, about letting the body lead. I'd trusted once. I'd paid for it. So I learned systems, patterns, probabilities. I learned how to turn chaos into something measurable, something predictable. I learned how to make sure no one ever had to stand in a room again and wonder who would lose control next. The protocol hadn't been about power. It had been about prevention. I moved into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, hands clasped tight. For a moment the order around me felt less like comfort and more like armor. Rigid, necessary, heavy. The image of Unit 8 flashed uninvited across my mind. The empty eyes. The way his body had folded in on itself, not in violence, but in absence. I swallowed hard. No, I said quietly, as if the word could push the memory away. That's not the same. It couldn't be. I wouldn't allow it to be. If control was cruel, then chaos was worse. I knew that. I had lived it. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling the weight in my chest press down again, slow and insistent. Vulnerability crept in where certainty should have been, and I hated how easily it unsettled me. Control was protection. Control was safety. Control was the only thing standing between order and pain. I closed my eyes, repeating the thought until it steadied my breathing. Outside the city hummed on, uncontrolled, unpredictable, alive. And for the first time that frightened me more than it reassured. The training yard looked different at night. The concrete was dark with rain, slick and unforgiving, reflecting the harsh white of a single overhead floodlight. The city beyond the fence had blurred into shadows and distant sound. Sirens, engines, life continuing elsewhere. Here, there was only breath and rain, and the steady impact of bodies against the ground. Marcus moved through drills alone. No wolves tonight. No audience. Just repetition. Shift control under strain, muscle memory tested until it failed, then rebuilt. His jacket lay abandoned near the wall, shirt plastered to his skin, hair dark with water. Every movement was economical, practiced, as if his body remembered things his mind didn't bother arguing with anymore. I hadn't announced myself. I wasn't sure why I was there at all. "You're staring again," Marcus said without turning. "I'm observing," I replied automatically. He snorted, wiping rain from his face. "You observe a lot for someone who doesn't like what he sees." I stepped closer, the cold biting through my coat. "Why train like this?" I asked. "At night. Alone." He considered me for a moment, then shrugged. "Pain's honest. Doesn't care who's watching." "That's not an answer." "It is if you've learned to listen." We stood there, rain filling the silence between us. Up close, I could see the old scars better now, faded lines across his ribs, one shoulder that didn't quite sit right, none of them decorative. "People think alphas don't feel fear," Marcus said suddenly, "like it burns out of us with the rest." I didn't interrupt. "They're wrong," he continued. "We just don't get the luxury of freezing." He flexed his hands, water dripping from his fingers. "First time I lost control, I broke a man's arm. Not in a fight. In a panic." My chest tightened. "I stopped shifting after that," he said. "Tried to lock it down. Thought if I heard enough, the wolf would stay quiet." "And did it?" I asked softly. He laughed once, short and humorless. "No. But it taught me something." "What?" "That pain doesn't erase instinct," Marcus said. "It teaches you where your edges are." The rain soaked through my sleeves, unnoticed. I watched him. Really watched him this time. Not as an obstacle or a liability, but as a man who had survived his own worst moments and kept going anyway. "You don't trust systems," I said. "I trust what I can feel," he replied. "What I can recover from." "And if you fail?" "Then I learn where I failed," he said simply. "And I don't hide it." Something in my chest loosened, just a fraction. Respect, unwelcome but undeniable, settled in its place. He met my gaze, the intensity there quiet now. "You didn't come out here to argue." "No," I admitted. "Why then?" I hesitated. Rain tracing cold lines down my neck. "Because I wanted to understand why you're so sure I'm wrong." Marcus studied me for a long moment. Then he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him cutting through the cold. "Because I was where your wolves were," he said. "And no one shut the system off for me." The rain fell harder. drumming against concrete and skin alike. We stood there, neither retreating, the space between us charged but contained. For the first time, my thoughts didn't rush to categorize or defend. They simply stayed. And that felt like something dangerous. The server room was never meant to feel like a confession booth. It was buried 3 levels underground, shielded from external networks, soundproof to the point where my footsteps felt intrusive. Rows of black towers lined the walls, their indicator lights blinking in slow synchronized rhythms, steady, obedient. The air was cold and dry, humming softly with controlled power. I like places like this. They made sense. It was past midnight. The building above slept. No oversight. No observers. Just me and the system I knew better than anyone alive. Or so I'd thought. I pulled up the core architecture of Alpha 7, bypassing standard permissions with muscle memory I'd perfected over years. Layer after layer unfolded on my screen. Behavioral dampening, hormonal modulation, neural feedback loops, everything exactly where it should be. Clean. Elegant. I should have stopped there. Instead, I noticed an inconsistency. A checksum that didn't quite align. A nested command set buried deeper than the documented parameters. It wasn't active by default, only triggered under specific stress conditions. I frowned, and drilled down. The code that emerged made my breath hitch. This wasn't aggression suppression. It wasn't even emotional regulation. It was compliance architecture, a quiet layer designed to reroute decision-making priority. To interrupt instinctual choice, not violent impulse. When stress crossed a certain threshold, the protocol didn't calm the wolf. It replaced the moment of choice. My fingers went numb as I scrolled. Increased suggestibility, reduced resistance to external command cues. A failsafe that could be toggled remotely, logged as stabilization. My stomach turned violently. No, I whispered. The word echoed too loudly in the silent room. I sank into the chair, cold seeping through my clothes as if the floor itself had reached up to grab me. This wasn't a side effect. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. My vision tunneled as understanding slammed into place with brutal clarity. The empty look in Unit 8's eyes. The way he hadn't fought, hadn't resisted, hadn't chosen, because he hadn't been allowed to. The room felt suddenly too small. The hum of the servers grew louder, sharper, drilling into my skull. I swallowed hard, but nausea surged anyway, hot and insistent. I had written this. Not the hidden layer, not directly, but the framework that allowed it to exist. The trust that let it slip through review. The assumption that control, by definition, was benevolent. My hands trembled as I pulled up the authorization history. Corporate signatures. Government contracts. Plausible deniability wrapped in elegant code. A leash. My chest constricted painfully. Breath coming shallow as a wave of cold swept through me. I stood too fast, dizziness crashing in, and braced myself against the rack of servers, metal biting into my palms. This wasn't protection. This was ownership. The realization hit harder than any accusation Marcus had thrown at me. He hadn't been exaggerating. He'd been understating it. A memory surfaced unbidden, 16 years old, blood on the floor, the sound of chaos tearing through a room. I'd sworn no one would ever feel that powerless again. And here I was, building a system that took power away before anyone could even reach for it. My breath stuttered. Panic rose sharp and unfamiliar, clawing its way up my spine. I pressed a hand to my sternum, grounding myself by force. This couldn't leave this room. If I flagged it, the system would bury the report. If I stayed silent, it would keep spreading, quiet, clean, irreversible. There was no neutral ground anymore. I stared at the lines of code glowing softly on the screen, each one suddenly heavy with consequence. For years I'd believed that removing choice in moments of crisis was mercy. Now I understood what it really was. Fear, dressed up as safety. The cold settled deeper, but beneath it, something else stirred. An ache, sharp and insistent. Guilt, rage, resolve. This was the point of no return. I straightened slowly, hands steadying as the panic burned itself down into something harder, clearer. If the protocol could erase will, then it could be dismantled. And I knew exactly where to start. The training hall was empty when I arrived. No wolves. No movement. Just the echo of my footsteps against bare concrete, and the faint smell of sweat that never quite left the place. The lights were dimmed to standby mode, throwing long shadows across the floor like bars. Marcus was already there. He sat on the edge of the mat area, forearms resting on his knees, head slightly bowed. Not waiting in the way people usually did, impatient or expectant, but present, as if he'd known I would come the moment I understood. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "Neither should you," he replied without looking up. I stopped a few feet away, my throat tight. The words I'd rehearsed in the server room tangled the moment I tried to speak them aloud. "There's a hidden layer in the protocol," I said finally. "It's not for aggression. It's for compliance." Marcus lifted his head slowly. I pressed on, the confession spilling out sharper now, desperate. "Under stress, it suppresses choice. It reroutes decision-making. They don't freeze because they're overwhelmed. They freeze because the system removes the option to resist." The silence that followed was heavy, but not shocked. Marcus stood, joints cracking softly, and faced me fully. His expression was controlled, his anger leashed so tightly I could feel the tension radiating off him. "You didn't know," he said. "It wasn't a question." "No," I said, the word burning. "But I should have." He took a step closer, then another, not threatening, measured. "You keep saying protocol," Marcus said quietly. "Like it's something abstract." My chest ached. "I built the framework. I thought." "You thought control would keep everyone safe," he finished. "I get that." I shook my head. "No. You don't." He stopped an arm's length away, eyes locked on mine. "I do. Because that's what they told me when they put a collar on me after my first incident." The word hit like a physical blow. "They called it support," Marcus continued. "Structure, accountability. But it was just a nicer word for obedience. Shame flooded hot and immediate. I couldn't look away. "They took away my choice," he said. "And told me I should be grateful." My voice came out hoarse. "I didn't want that." "I know," he said. "That almost broke me." "You built a leash," Marcus said then. Not loud, not cruel. Final. The phrase lodged deep, unforgiving. I swallowed hard. Heat stinging behind my eyes. "I trusted the system," I said. "I trusted the review boards. I trusted—" "You trusted that you were the smartest person in the room," he said, not unkindly. "That happens." The anger flared then, sudden and vicious. But not at him. At myself. "I hate this," I snapped. "I hate that I didn't see it. That I defended it. That I stood there and watched them shut down and called it success." My hands curled into fists, nails biting into my palms. I became the thing I was trying to stop. Marcus didn't step back. He didn't soften either. "Then do something about it," he said. "I can't just pull the plug," I said. "The system's everywhere, citywide. If I move too fast, they'll bury it," he agreed. "And you?" I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know how to fix this." Marcus studied me, rain-soaked night and scars and all. And for the first time there was no challenge in his eyes, only resolve. "You don't fix it alone," he said. "And you don't do it clean." He reached out, not to grab me, but to press 2 fingers briefly against my wrist, grounding, deliberate. "You already crossed the line," Marcus added. "Now decide which side you're on." The contact burned, brief and undeniable. When he stepped back, the hall felt colder than before. But the path ahead, terrifying as it was, had never been clearer. There were no sensors. That was the first thing I noticed, the absence of them. No faint hum under the floor. No status lights blinking reassurance. Just concrete beneath my feet and open space ahead of me. I hated it. "Stand there," Marcus said, pointing to the center of the mat. "Shoes off." "I'm not a trainee," I said. "You are today." I hesitated, then complied, setting my shoes aside with more care than necessary. The floor was cold through my socks. Real. Unmediated. My pulse picked up immediately. "This isn't a test," I said. "I'm not shifting." "Everyone's shifting something," Marcus replied. "Yours just happens to be in your head." I shot him a look. He ignored it. "Feet shoulder-width apart," he said. "Don't lock your knees." "I know how to stand." "Humor me." I adjusted, irritation simmering. The air felt thicker here, charged in a way I couldn't quantify. Without a protocol running, my thoughts raced ahead, cataloging risks, predicting failure. "Breathe," Marcus said. "I am breathing." "You're thinking," he corrected. "That's different." He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his presence before he touched me. When he did, it was minimal. 2 fingers pressing lightly against my upper back. "Here," he said. That's where you're holding it. My body reacted before my mind could argue. A sharp inhale, shoulders tensing. Don't fight it, Marcus murmured. Notice it. Notice it. The instruction felt absurdly simple. And terrifying. My chest tightened. Panic flaring hot and sudden. Without the protocol's dampening, every sensation felt amplified. The echo of my heartbeat in my ears. The awareness of space, of vulnerability. This is a bad idea, I said, voice tight. Marcus didn't move his hand. You can stop? The words landed harder than any command ever had. Choice. I swallowed. My throat ached. What if I lose control? You won't, he said calmly. And if you do, I'm here. I laughed once, breathless. That's not reassuring. It should be, he replied. I'm very hard to knock over. Despite myself, a flicker of humor cut through the fear. It loosened something. Again, Marcus said. Breathe. Lower. Slower. I focused, not on suppressing the tension, but on tracking it. The way it coiled in my shoulders. The way my jaw clenched automatically. I let the breath move lower, filling space I usually ignored. My heartbeat slowed. The panic didn't vanish. But it stopped escalating. That's it, Marcus said quietly. Something shifted then. Not a breakthrough. Not relief. Acceptance. The realization that control didn't have to mean absence. That I could feel the fear, and still choose what to do with it. I exhaled fully, my body settling into itself in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The weight in my chest eased, not gone, but manageable. Marcus's hand dropped from my back, but he didn't step away. We stood there, closer now. The space between us charged and intimate in a way that had nothing to do with dominance or submission. Just two bodies sharing the same moment of gravity. You okay? He asked. I nodded, surprised to find it was true. I think so. His gaze lingered on my face, searching, not judging. I became acutely aware of how close he was, of the warmth still radiating from where he'd touched me. No protocol, no buffer, just breath. See? Marcus said softly. Your body knows how to choose. You just have to let it. I met his eyes, something steady and new, taking root beneath the fear. You could have forced the point. He shook his head. Wouldn't have worked. Why? Because choice, he said, only counts if it's yours. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Of shared understanding, of restrained closeness, of something unspoken that neither of us rushed to define. For the first time the lack of control didn't feel like a threat. It felt like freedom. The corporate office smelled like polished wood and filtered air. Everything about the space was designed to imply stability, soft lighting, soundproofed walls, art chosen by committee to offend no one. The kind of place where difficult decisions were made without ever touching the consequences. I sat at the long table alone when they started. Alpha 7 has been a success, Director Klein said, fingers steepled. Public approval is high. Incident reports are down. And internal resistance is growing, another voice added. Mostly from non-technical staff. I didn't look away from the screen in front of me. You mean Marcus Hale? A pause. Calculated. We mean unregulated influence, Klein said smoothly. Mr. Hale's methods are inconsistent with city standards. They're effective, I said. Effective doesn't mean acceptable. The word landed with practiced finality. Klein tapped her tablet and a document slid across my screen. An amended deployment order. Mandatory rollout. Expanded authority. Less transparency. And one more line tucked neatly at the bottom. Termination of contract. Hale, Marcus. Immediate suspension pending review. My breath caught. You can't be serious, I said. We're very serious, Klein replied. Your instructor friend is a liability. He interferes with protocol compliance and undermines public confidence. He prevents harm, I shot back. You've seen the field data. We've seen enough, she said. This is your opportunity to correct course. I finally looked up. Or else? Her expression didn't change. Or else the program continues without your oversight. And Mr. Hale's actions will be reclassified as obstruction. The implication was clear. Criminal obstruction. My hands curled under the table, fingers digging into my palms. Fear flared hot and immediate, not for myself, but sharp, and focused on a single name. You're asking me to choose, I said. We're asking you to be reasonable, Klein replied. Sign the update, distance yourself, let us handle the rest. Handle it. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thinner. I thought of the server room, the hidden layer glowing on my screen like an accusation. I thought of the wolves sitting quietly in the corridor, shaken but present. I thought of Marcus in the rain, telling me pain was honest. This was what silence cost. I need time, I said. You have until end of day, Klein replied. After that the decision will be made for you. The meeting ended with polite efficiency. Chairs slid back. Screens went dark. No one raised their voice. I left the office feeling like I'd stepped out of a vacuum. The city hummed below. Traffic, voices, life moving forward, unaware of the leash tightening quietly around it. Fear still twisted in my gut, cold and insistent. But beneath it, something else had settled into place. Clarity. They didn't want safety. They wanted compliance. And they were willing to sacrifice anyone who got in the way. Including Marcus. Including me, if I proved inconvenient. I stopped in the lobby, staring at my reflection in the glass. For years I'd believed that standing between chaos and order meant choosing restraint. Now I understood what restraint really meant to them. Silence. My comm buzzed in my pocket, Marcus's name lighting the screen. I didn't answer yet. But I already knew what I was going to do. I didn't sleep. By dawn, the decision had hardened into something sharp and irreversible. Fear was still there, tight in my chest, cold at the base of my spine, but it no longer controlled the shape of my thoughts. I moved through the base like a ghost, credentials opening doors that would soon close behind me. The system trusted me. That was its final mistake. In the control hub, screens glowed with live feeds from city subdivisions, training units, response teams, containment zones. Wolves on standby. Protocols armed and waiting. I initiated the override sequence with hands that didn't shake. Not a shutdown. A disruption. The hidden layer was elegant in its cruelty. So was its undoing. I rerouted priority signals, flooded the compliance architecture with contradictory commands, forced the system to trip over its own assumptions. Across the city, Alpha 7 stuttered. Alerts flared. Technicians shouted. The calm synthetic voice cracked mid-announcement. Protocol instability detected. I switched channels. Marcus, I said into the comm. Now. I'm already moving, he replied. No surprise. No hesitation. They're feeling it. Tell me what you see. Static. Then the sound of boots on concrete. Confusion. Marcus said. Disorientation. No aggression spikes. They're scared, but they're still here. Relief hit hard and fast. In one feed, a response unit froze as the protocol cut in and out, control flickering like bad signal. Wolves staggered, hands going to their heads, breathing rough. Marcus was there seconds later, stepping into the center of them like an anchor dropped into chaos. Eyes on me, he barked. You're not broken. You're not losing control. One wolf snarled reflexively, then stopped himself, breath shuddering. Good, Marcus said. That's you choosing. I pushed the override deeper, forcing the system offline in waves instead of all at once. Too fast, and they'd panic. Too slow and the city would clamp down. My comm lit up with incoming calls, operations, security, directors whose voices I ignored. The base shook with tension. Technicians scrambled, trying to regain control they'd never actually had. Cole, someone shouted behind me. What did you do? I didn't turn. I gave it back. On the feeds, the wolves didn't riot. They didn't tear the city apart like the fear models had predicted. They breathed. Some cried. Some laughed, sharp and hysterical. A few dropped to their knees, overwhelmed but present. Marcus moved constantly, voice cutting through the noise, hands steady and grounding. He took a blow to the shoulder from a panicking recruit and barely flinched, redirecting the motion with practiced ease. Easy, he murmured. I've got you. Stay with me. This was what the models had never accounted for. Connection. The system screamed one final error as the hidden layer collapsed in on itself, self-terminating under the conflicting inputs. The lights steadied. The feeds stabilized. Silence followed, not the suffocating kind they wanted but something raw and uncertain. Then the alarms changed pitch. Security lockdown. They're sealing the building, Marcus said. You good? I swallowed, pulse pounding. I will be. Footsteps thundered in the corridor outside the control hub. Orders barked. Doors slammed. I'm pulling my access now, I said. After this, I'm just another liability. Marcus huffed softly. Welcome to the club. I shut the system down completely and stepped away from the console as security burst in, weapons raised. Hands where we can see them. I complied calmly, heart racing but mind clear. Through the chaos, my comm buzzed one last time. Marcus again. They're steady, he said quietly. All of them. The words settled something deep in my chest. They cuffed me, led me away. Voices overlapped, accusations flying. But through it all, the feeds burned into my memory. Wolves standing on their own feet, shaken but whole, choosing themselves in the absence of control. As they pushed me toward the exit, I caught a final glimpse of Marcus through the glass wall at the end of the corridor. Bruised, soaked in sweat, very much alive. Our eyes met. No victory, no regret, just understanding. The protocol was gone. And for the first time, the city had to listen. The temporary commission room felt less like a courtroom, and more like a badly staged apology. Folding tables, portable screens, too much coffee. People who had learned, very suddenly, how close they'd come to a scandal they couldn't control. I sat with my hands folded, posture familiar, expression neutral, muscle memory from years of meetings just like this. The difference was internal. I wasn't bracing anymore. After review, the chair of the commission said, "The Alpha 7 protocol is hereby suspended indefinitely." A murmur rippled through the room. Further, she continued, all compliance layer architectures are to be classified as unethical behavioral coercion and banned from future deployment. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They asked questions. Technical ones. Political ones. Questions designed to distribute responsibility so no one would have to carry too much of it alone. I answered what mattered, and ignored the rest. When they finally got to me, really got to me, the room quieted. "What will you do now, Mr. Cole?" the chair asked. I considered the question. Not defensively, honestly. "I'm leaving the system," I said. "I won't build tools that remove choice. If I work again, it will be on voluntary models, hybrid approaches, body first, consent-based." A pause, then a nod. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Or maybe that was just the absence of pressure. Marcus waited by the railing, arms crossed, expression unreadable until he saw me. "Well?" he asked. "It's dead," I said. "The protocol. Permanently." He let out a breath that was half laugh, half relief. "Good." I hesitated. "They're not charging you." "I know," he said dryly. "They'd have to admit I was right." I almost smiled. We stood there for a moment, the city stretching below us, messy, loud, alive. "I'm not staying," I said. "Here, I mean. Didn't think you would. And I'm not pretending I have all the answers now." Marcus tilted his head. "Would have been suspicious if you did." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the weight of everything we hadn't said settle comfortably between us. "So," I asked, "do you always recruit former enemies?" "Only the ones willing to learn how to breathe," he replied. I laughed, short and surprised. For the first time, the future didn't look like a system diagram. It looked like possibility. Morning light spilled across the new training space in uneven bands. No glass walls. No embedded sensors. Just open air, reinforced floors, and the low murmur of people waking into themselves. Wolves stretched and talked quietly. Steam rising from coffee mugs. Laughter breaking out without permission. I stood near the edge of the mat, tablet tucked under my arm, not monitoring, just taking notes. Marcus moved through the room with familiar ease, correcting posture here, offering a quiet word there. He glanced over at me. "You're overthinking again." "I'm documenting," I said. "Sure you are." One of the trainees waved at me, grinning. "Hey Doc, you gonna try the breathing drill today?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. In a minute." Marcus's mouth curved, fond and infuriating. "That's progress." We worked side by side, not seamlessly, not without friction, but, honestly, my models adapted to lived experience. His methods benefited from structure that didn't cage them. No illusions. No saviors. Just work. At the end of the session, I stood barefoot on the mat, eyes closed, breathing slow and deliberate. No dampening. No override. Just choice. Marcus brushed past me, close enough to feel, and murmured, "See? Still alive?" I opened my eyes, warmth spreading through my chest. More than alive. Free enough to feel it.